Boker Tov, everybody, and welcome. Thank you. I do apologize, I guess, a little, whatever. It just worked out with my schedule to make it here. As I mentioned, I'm coming straight from the shul in Florence. Where our hotel's a 5-minute walk away, and it's a very, giving us a whole history of the shul. It's very beautiful. If you overlook, when you come to Florence, the first thing they take you is to look the whole city. It's like in a movie, a postcard. There's this unbelievable view of the city. I don't think you have that anywhere else. Not in Jerusalem, nowhere where you can sort of go to, that I know of. Just go to the top and you see the whole city before you, see a huge dome of the church, and off to the right, not quite as big, can't be quite as big, but a huge dome of the synagogue. And it's really a beautiful shul. It's underused. It was not damaged in World War II by the Nazis and whatever. Okay, but if you get the chance to go, listen, this is whatever. It's like I've mentioned many times, you really gain a lot by traveling, and it's only because of my work at Torah Motion I got to do this. Before this, I had been to nowhere, and whatever is part of what I do. So we have these wonderful trips really in the summer for those who can come and really learn a tremendous amount. Yesterday, Mark talked literally for 6 hours straight on the bus with like a break here, break 3 hours. Then we stopped in Pitigliano, then another 3 hours. And so he does a lot of the learning. But okay, we're here to learn on the Siddur. So before I start, or really as part of I start, I just want to mention, I always like to mention we're learning on the Siddur. So let's do some minhagim of the Siddur. So I was in Milan. We had one trip to Provence in the south of France, and then we had a week later a trip to Italy, here in Italy, and we didn't go home in the middle, so we were in Milan. I actually met my aunt in Milan last Shabbos, and not part of the Torah Motion group. And I go to shul on Sunday at Shivas Arba Tammuz, and amazing. The laning takes about 4 times as long as the laning takes on in any shul in New York. There's not laning. Everything in Sephardic type shuls takes longer because they say everything out loud. Davening Monday morning was 1 hour and 5 minutes. Tuesday and Wednesday was like 55 minutes. I don't know, in America, if you tried to pull off a 55-minute davening every day, you wouldn't get a minyan. I guess the Sephardic shows do it in America too, but we Ashkenazim don't go for that. Like we have to mumble the words and get out of shul quickly and not pay attention to what we're saying. That's why we have this class, so we can learn how to pay attention to what we're saying. But here they say everything slowly, but that's not why the laning took 4 times as long. That's maybe why it took twice as long. Why did it take 4 times as long? Because the laning was 3 times, twice as long as what it is. And I said, this is so smart. We're so stupid. And the minhag they have here makes so much sense. So I'll show you. Let me share my screen for 1 second. So if you know the laning on every fast day, we lane from Vayechal. Why do we do that? Actually, section 2. Right? We lane from Shmot Perek Lamed Beit, chapter 32, the aftermath of the sin of the golden calf. Vayechal Moshe Pnei Hashem Vayomer. When Moshe beseeches Vayechal, he beseeches God to forgive the Jewish people, and that's when God forgives him for the sin of the golden calf. So that is what we read on every fast day. Interestingly enough, we don't read it when we were actually forgiven for the sin of the golden calf, which was on Yom Kippur. The reason we have Yom Kippur, why do we have Yom Kippur every year? Very simple reason, because God, Vayomer Hashem Salachti Ki Varecha, God said, I forgive you, and that was said on the 10th of Tishrei, Yom Kippur, and that's why we have Yom Kippur. Ki Bayom Hazeh Yechaper Alechem, on that day, God will forgive us. So the only fast day we don't read the sin of the golden calf is on Yom Kippur. We read in the morning about the service.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Can everybody else can hear me? Okay,
I
thank
can
God.
hear you.
Okay, I don't know. You got to play with your sound. I'm sorry. Maybe log off and log back on. What can I say? Hope it'll work. But so it's very funny almost. On Yom Kippur, we read in the morning about, which I understand, we read the service of Yom Kippur, the Yom Kippur sacrificial service from Parshat Achrimot, and then in the afternoon, which we're not going to discuss now, we discussed other times, a little bit strange. We read actually later on in Parshat Achrimot, and maybe that's why, because it's just later on in the Parsha, we read the sexual sins, that the sexual ethic of Judaism. But we don't lane Vayechal. We lane Vayechal in every fast day, Asar B'Tevet, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, and Som Gedalia. We lane them, and Tiny Esther. We lane it on Tiny Esther too. So the 5 of the 6 fast days. So why do we lead it? Because we assume all the fast days are about God's forgiveness, except Tiny Esther's not, which is interesting to read it. Tiny Esther has nothing to do with sitting, right? It's Rav Shachta used to tell us, Tiny Esther, some rabbi, some of the poskim said, a minor kid, I always tell you, if this year Tisha B'Av's on a Sunday, so let's say somebody's born on the 10th of Av, say they're born on the 10th of Av, and Tisha B'Av, which often happens, falls on Shabbos. This year it falls on Sunday because it really falls on Sunday, but that's rare. Much more often, the 9th of Av is on Shabbos, and we push it off till Sunday. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, we do not follow the view of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. The editor of the Mishnah says, Hol Shanitcha Yitcha. We're going to skip Tisha B'Av this year. We don't like to do mourning stuff. We missed it. We can't mourn on Shabbos. So good. Finished. We skipped it. Amazing. No Tisha B'Av this year. So that's the view. It's a view of the Tanaim, but we don't follow that view, as we all know. We push off Tisha B'Av to Sunday. So what about a kid whose bar mitzvah is on the 10th of Av? I'm sorry, his bar mitzvah is on the 10th of Av. So on the 9th of Av, he doesn't have to fast. Now, the 10th of Av is a fast day, but it's not really the 10th of Av. We're fasting because it's the 9th of Av. But the 9th of Av, he didn't have to fast. People don't know this, but there is no chinuch in Avelus. We don't train people. We tell a kid, when you're ready to do the mitzvah, do the mitzvah. So when a kid knows how to dress himself, he puts on tzitzis. When a kid knows how to watch tefillin, which we assume is never, he puts on tefillin. So that's why some people have a custom. They don't put on tefillin before the bar mitzvah, because even bar mitzvah boys we're not sure should put on tefillin. What can we do? Because it's very hard to do it. We don't put, but tzitzis, who cares? You can play in the mud in your tzitzis. So as soon as the kid knows how to get dressed, when he knows how to shake a lulav, meaning, hodulash, not just to pick it and, play thinking like a baseball bat, but properly shake the lulav, so you give him lulav. But we don't have chinuch by Avelus. I don't understand why 12-year-old kids fast, except Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is an exception. Yom Kippur is, obviously, we know Yom Kippur is slightly different, but the fast days have real mourning. Yom Kippur is not a fast day of mourning. Yom Kippur is also a happy day. And so it's not a fast day of mourning. But Shiva Tammuz, Som Gedalia, Sarba Tevet, and whatever else, and Tisha B'Av, those 4 fast days of mourning, there's no chinuch. So a kid whose bar mitzvah is on the 10th of Av does not have to fast on Tisha B'Av. That's halach. I'm not saying you should go to Baskin Robbins and eat ice cream, but you don't have to fast. So there's a shaila. What about when the fast is on the 10th of Av? In other words, he's bar mitzvah when we're fasting, but he wasn't bar mitzvah yesterday. So even poskim will say he doesn't have to fast. Doesn't have to fast until 9th of Av. He wasn't the bar mitzvah boy or a bat mitzvah girl. Okay, fine. And so, but Tiny Esther is different. Tiny Esther and Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, Purim, and Yom Kippur have a lot in common. So Purim, Tiny Esther is not mourning. We're not fasting as a mourning. We're fasting out of joy. It's a Tani Shasimcha. Like when you get married, you're so excited. You can't eat. So we're very happy. So that's why we fast. So that a minor, we have to train them in that mitzvah too. And Yom Kippur also, we want to train them. But we don't train them in other fast days. And that's a halacha that people are somehow unaware of, which is why I've asked this to people, the camps, camps always in the 3 weeks. That's the way, unless you want to move to Australia or South Africa, where we live, the summer and the 3 weeks go together. It kind of messes up the summer, when it messes up 4 Sundays in a row, no concerts, what can you do? Okay, so swimming, they don't go swimming in the 9 days. So I don't know if the kid's 12 years old, you can go swimming in the 9 days, and there's no issue not to go swimming. There's no issue not to take a shower either. That's for me and you too. I take hot showers in the 9 days. I never did when I was a kid, but Baruch Hashem, I was in Rav Shachter's shir, and I learned that you should take showers in the 9 days. Well, why? Because as Rav Soloveitchik explained, well, what's the 9 days? It's made up. There's no 9 days in the Talmud. People should be aware of this. There's Misha Nichnas Av Mimati B'Simcha, which means don't have a court case. If you have a court case, you should try to push it off. But the halachas of not eating meat in the Talmud is the last meal before Tisha B'Av, meaning. And this year, when it's on a Shabbos, the halach is afilu sudat Shlomo HaMelech. You can even have a feast on Shabbos like Shlomo HaMelech. That's the expression of the rabbis. But in the normal year, you can't drink wine and you can't eat milk on the meal before the fasting. No big deal. So we, of course, extended it to the 9 days. But the 9 days, that's a minhag. We have a minhag for 9. Okay, we observe minhagim. Very nice. But every minhag, as Rav Soloveitchik was the world's expert on minhagim, every minhag, what it's based on. So every minhag has to have some basis. And not just, a minhag doesn't mean something we do. That just because you do it, right? The pot, everyone knows the old joke with the gefilte fish, right? Who doesn't know that joke? Do I have to say the joke? No, I don't have to say the joke, do I? Is there anybody who doesn't know the gefilte fish joke? Oh, Susan, what am I going to do with you? Okay, so that's, every week the mother, when she makes the fish, whatever, she chops off a little piece and then she whatever and puts it away and puts it in. So the kid goes, well, so they don't know. And the grandma, that's how my grandmother. So it turns out the great grandmother, the pot wasn't big enough for the fish. So they had to chop off a little bit of the fish before they cooked it. So that's not a minhag. That's something we do. By the way, it's not a minhag to make Shabbos early in the summer either. That's Rav Moshe Feinstein has a fascinating tshuva. Let's say husbands and wives are supposed to observe, maybe today we live in a totally different world. Maybe our perception of marriage is different. I don't know. Maybe that does impact on halakha, but in the previous generations where husbands and wife had the same name and marriage was different, Mr. and Mrs. In that world, so the idea was that a husband and wife should observe the same minhagim. So the husband goes to shul at 7 o'clock. Shabbos is at 8:30. So can the wife, let's say, or the wife goes to shul today, but in the old-fashioned way, the husband goes to shul and the wife stays at home. So the wife wants to talk on the phone to her friends till 8 o'clock. What does she make Shabbos at 7 o'clock for? So but the minhag of the husband is to make Shabbos early. So the wife has to accept Shabbos. So Rav Moshe says no. There's no minhag. You never go make a late Shabbos. You always go to the 7 o'clock minyan. Never ever go to the 8:30 minyan. That's not your minhag. Why? Because it's convenience. You do it because it's convenient. You want to eat at 10 o'clock at night. How do I know it's not your minhag? Because what do you do in the winter? Do you go to the 3 o'clock minyan in the winter? Right. So if you went to the 3 o'clock minyan, there is no 3 o'clock minyan in the winter. But why not? Why shouldn't we accept Shabbos? So instead of Shabbos gets really early in New York, like 3:59 is your earliest Shabbos. We never get below 4:22. But in 3:59, an hour 50 minutes early, 2:30 mincha. Get home at 4 o'clock, at 3/4 to 4, make Kiddush, an extra hour and a half. I love Shabbos, so we don't do that. It's not convenient. So when we do it, there's no minhag to make Shabbos. It's something we do. Anyways, so the minhag of the 9 days, Rav Soloveitchik says it's based on Shloshim. We observe it like it's Shloshim Tisha B'Av. We observe like a Beilut, and the 3 weeks is like Yud Beit Chodesh, the 12 months. Maybe it may even be the 9 days Shavuot Shechavo and Tisha B'Av. But let's leave that as it may. So we observe the 9 days as if you're in Shloshim. That's a minhag. So the halakha is that you're not allowed to take a shower in Shloshim. That's what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed. A parent dies for 30 days. You can't wash yourself. No, do you know any idiot who? I pardon my English. I'm sorry. Do you know anybody who follows such a thing? Ridiculous. Nobody follows that today. We're all istinists, and we can't tolerate that. We're not allowed to go to the spa for 30 days. Taking a shower 2,000 years ago was like going to the spa. So that you can't do. But our showers aren't going to the spa. It's just basic hygiene. You throw somebody out of the room. You didn't take a shower for 30 days. So once we shower every day, so the halach of the 9 days, not the shower, went away. That's what, so Rav Schachter told us that Rav Soloveitchik, so he was quoting Rav Soloveitchik, says Rav Soloveitchik told him that his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, if you want to be machmir, Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av, after Chatzot, not to take a shower, that's okay. You can be machmir like the 6 hours before Tisha B'Av, but to be machmir on the 3rd of Av, not to take a shower, make no sense. So because we don't not take showers in Shloshim. The 9 days are not stricter than Shloshim. Anyways, that's just people are not aware of these things. People have to know what the basis of what we do, and then it doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, Rav Shekel was very into that. That Hakim, like his famous one that you're not supposed to light candles on the second night of Yom Tov. So I know people don't listen to that, but I understand why. But says he can't light this. Well, why do we light candles? So we should have light. That's why we light candles. Well, we should have light. No, now we have the chandelier is burning away the first night of Yom Tov. Now it's the second night of Yom Tov. You're lighting a fire for no purpose. It's Chalol Yom Tov. I'm a Chalol Yom Tov. That's what Rav Schachter holds. So I understand many people disagree with him. I get it, romantic. But there's a lot of logic. And he says your grandmother lit lights on the second of Yom Tov because they didn't have a chandelier in the dining room. But we live in a different society, so the halacha has changed. Whenever we go away, go to a hotel, for Shabbos. So 100 people light the candles outside. So I tell my wife it's a bracha levatala. You're not allowed to light candles there. I'm sorry. Nobody has to listen to me. Just ask your local rabbi. But anybody who's here, ask. So what is having an extra those two little lights, that they make with 100 other people that you don't even see that's outside the room? That's the meaningless act. So you want to light candles, but don't make a bracha. What are you making a bracha on that for? Anyways, okay, I'm sorry. Anyways, back to what I was saying here. So Shiva, so we read Vayichal all the Yamim Tovim, all the fast days. No. So what do we read? So now let me share my screen. I started before and then I went on this long tangent. Okay, to say there. So let me just go here. Where are we here? Let's start here. So we read Vayachal Moshe et Beyad Hashem Yomer Lama Hashem Yecharav Chabimecha. It's a beautiful laning, and the most beautiful haftorah of the year, of course, is Dirshu Hashem B'Himatzo, the haftorah of the class. So if I read Vayachal Moshe, I'm not even putting the English here, just so we could do it quickly. Why should the Egyptians say? And then Vayivnachei Al Rosh Hadiber Lasot Lamo. That's Rishon. We don't read Vayefen Vayered Moshe Minahar Shnei Luchot Avadim Biyado. I'm going to go through now here. Now the Torah tells the whole story, basically, of what happened with the Chet HaEgel, right? And what happened, and Moshe praying, and the rest of chapter 32. Then you have chapter 33, where Moshe, God tells Moshe, I can't be your God anymore. I'm not taking the land of Israel. A whole long discussion, and leave me alone. And Moshe wants to know the Yud Gimel Midot, and they have a whole discussion. Oh, and then we pick up. We skip, right? Everybody recognize that? We skip this whole section. This whole thing is skipped. The Balkor has to know you have to turn the Sefer Torah on a fast day. So in Milan for Shabbos, they didn't skip it. They read the whole thing. And the whole thing, it was very longly. I said, that's so smart. It makes so much sense. Only on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Because our tradition is they built the Chet HaEgel on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. So on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, which is the forgiveness was on Yom Kippur, but the building was on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. So you got to read the whole story. I can't do more story. Wow, beautiful. Like such a beautiful minhag that I've never seen done anywhere. And has anybody ever seen that done? And it made so much sense. Okay, that was just one little cute thing they did. Another cute things in the Siddur that we picked up. So in Rome, and by the way, the minhagim in Rome and Milan and Florence are not necessarily the same. I just wrote the one article. You see, Italy. Anybody know when Italy became a country? That's unfair because I'm here. But anybody know? Anybody want to guess? Canada became a country in 1867. I don't know how many people knew that. I should have asked you that one question. Everybody knows the United States became a country in 1776. Canada, 1860. Israel, 1948. No, when did Italy become a country?
1848.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a good guess. Why
1861.
1861. Very good. 1861. Yes. Italy was a series of states. And that's the ghetto in Rome. I alluded to ghetto in Rome. 1861, Jews are granted emancipation. What the unification of Italy means taking away from the Pope was running it. So the unification of Italy gave Jews right, but the papal stay was only in Rome, totally finished in 1870. So
wasn't it Garibaldi?
Yeah, he was the first prime minister of Italy. So 1861. So the minhagim. That's why I was going to write it, and maybe I'll write it in one of my upcoming thoughts. When I read this whole thing, I sent it out a few hours ago about Rome, Jerusalem. It's about Rome. It's not about Italy, because Venice and Rome are in two different countries. Like it's not like as Barcelona and Girona, even though they're today both in Spain. They weren't in Spain. Barcelona was not part of Spain in the Middle Ages. People have to understand, have to know maps and understand how countries worked. So often where you live, like the minhagim get established from different places. So the minhagim in Rome might be different. They're similar, of course, but they might be different. So in Rome, two interesting things to point out. And one, I asked the Gabbai in Shul, I didn't get an answer. They say la'ela ula'ela, at every single Kaddish. No Susan, I said only on Shiva Sarva Tammuz they laid that extra. That's what I'm saying. That's the beauty of the minhag. It makes so much sense because Shiva Sarva Tammuz is the day of the sin of the golden calf. They do not read it on the other days. So they say Le'ela Ula which we of course know we only say in a Ser to make Tshuva. So I went over to the Gabbai after Shul and I heard, what are they doing? Say Le'ela Ula. I said, wow, I never heard this. They do this in Yemen too. Okay. And Mark Shapiro checked. Oh yeah. So in Yemen, when you go to Yemen next time, I don't advise going to Yemen. Maybe some American bomber plane should go there. But when you go to Yemen, so that was the minhag to say Le'elu Le'el. The minhag I loved the most. I just found it, wow, this is really beautiful. So I just want to show you, you have to have Nusach Sfard. The minhag doesn't work if you have in Nusach Ashkenaz. So in Nusach Sfard, they say En Elokai every day. Nusach Ashkenaz only says it on Shabbos. So we know that En Elokai ends. You have to learn one halacha a day. And then we say, this famous paragraph, Amar Rav Elazar, Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim, Arbim Shalom. I'll say something not nice now, but okay, I can't help myself. How do you know the rabbis had a sense of humor? So, because they say Talmidei Chachamim Arbim Shalom Balam, because the Torah scholars bring peace to the world. Okay, no, sorry for that. Okay, Shanemar. So we caught that. I say that as a sad joke. We know, unfortunately, how much fighting there is among Talmidei Chachamim. It's a terrible thing. The rabbis all were well aware of this. The commentaries talk about that. Rabbis have, we've discussed this many times. Rabbis have a sense of arrogance. That's the Yetzer Hara of a businessman is money. The Yetzer Hara of a Talmid Chacham is arrogance. That's how the commentaries say, I'm great. I know so much. Give me respect, honor me. That's the Yetzer Hara for Talmidei Chachamim. And anyway, so but if they're not bringing peace, they're not really Talmidei Chachamim. Anyways, that's not the point. So they say this, and then the rabbi turns around. The rabbi gives a 3-minute shiur. They like learning. It's part of davening, and then they say and they say Kaddish. In other words, they take a break. They say in Elokai, and right in the middle of this paragraph, the rabbi turns around and gives a 5-minute shiur. So when the day I was there in shul, it was in Italian. But, it's okay. It's Yeshivish is like a universal language. So I could understand Bein HaMetzarim and Hisiguha, and I could pick up some of the terms. So I knew they were talking something about on the 3 weeks and, night is. I think that's just a beautiful minhag. In a lot of shuls, they'll learn after davening, but people are always in a big hurry. There's people running out the door. You can imagine the rabbi in the Young Israel this week gets up. Okay, we're starting a new minhag before that last Kaddish. And remember, people come to shul, they have to say Kaddish. We're going to have 5 minutes of learning. That'd be a revolt in the shul. But when you're used to an hour davening, what's an extra 5 minutes of learning? I think it's a beautiful, beautiful minhag that they did. Also, just to point out 2 other things, I don't think this one I for sure didn't mention last week. Maybe the other one I did. You'll let me know. I know in Florence it's not like this, but in Rome it is. Who's seen the shul in Rome? And anybody who's been shul? It's a beautiful shul, big, 150 feet tall. It's at the edge of where the old ghetto was. Just a beautiful building, and you notice the beam is not in the middle. It's like, quote unquote, like in a conservative and reform shul where everything's done up front. There's no beam in the middle. And like I mentioned last week, there is no orthodoxy in Italy. Orthodoxy only exists if there is reform. If there's no reform, there's no orthodoxy. Because orthodoxy is a response to reform. In other words, so Italy developed organically. It didn't have to respond. You read Jacob Katz, you read the other, scholars, this idea how orthodoxy developed and reform developed. Things that would have been allowed became forbidden because the reform did it. That was the big fights, that the mechitza became a big issue, not because the mechitza is such a big issue. It became a big issue because the conservatives made it a big issue not to have a mechitza. So the Orthodox had to make it a big issue to have a mechitza, whatever. And in Germany, the organ. And in Hungary, the beam in the middle. So it's interesting. In Rome, the beam is not in the middle; it's in the front. In Florence, I just coming from there a few minutes ago. It is in the middle. The beam is in the middle. But also in Florence, you mamish see it. They're right there. I never really heard an organ so much. They have the organ, the pipes where the organ comes, and our tour guide who. we always have a local tour guide who isn't Jewish, but she's very good. She's an art historian. She was saying, oh, it's an Orthodox shul. Of course, they don't play the organ, although she said they do play it at weddings. When the fights with Reform were about organs, all the rabbis banned organs at a wedding on a Wednesday night too. It wasn't just the Shabbos. It was organs are Reform, and we can't have organs in our shul ever. What's wrong with playing an organ in a shul on a Wednesday night? No, but obviously that got banned. So in Florence to this day, she said she's been to weddings in the shul where they play the organ. And Mark, of course, which I knew, pointed out until the 1960s, they played the organ on Shabbos. I don't call it an Orthodox shul, but you would call it an Orthodox shul. Everything's Orthodox. Mechitza, it's an Orthodox shul, but it's just not called Orthodox. Didn't develop any relation to Reform. So I think I mentioned last week, it's a very easy heter. Why to have an organ playing by a non-Jew, of course, because a Jew to play an organ is a rabbinic prohibition. And there's a very well-known principle in Jewish law, accepted by everybody, that to ask a non-Jew to do even a biblical prohibition is a rabbinic prohibition. I want hot food on Shabbos. I forgot to cook chicken, so I tell my non-Jewish maid to make me chicken on Shabbos, put on the oven, turn on everything. Totally, if I do it biblically prohibited. So if the non-Jew does, it's a rabbinic prohibition. I'm not supposed to ask non-Jew. I'm not violating any law in the Torah. So the rabbi said not to. Okay, we listen to the rabbis. But if there are two rabbi things, you tell the non-Jew, so that's one rabbinic prohibition, because whatever you tell him to do is going to be a rabbinic prohibition. But I only tell him to violate a rabbinic prohibition. I ask the non-Jew to play the organ. That's two rabbinic prohibitions, asking the non-Jew playing the organ. So there's what we call the shvut b'makom mitzvah. When you have two rabbinic mitzvot, and there's a mitzvah that's going to result out of this, then it's allowed on Shabbos. So the shvut, asking a non-Jew to play the organ to enhance the tefillot is considered a shvut. So much so, I forgot. Please God, if I remember, I'll look it up for next week. It's in the Ramah, the Shulchan Aruch. I forget what siman, the sheen, I don't remember exactly. The Ramah says we should try this and see how far you'll get. When the next time you marry off a child, somebody who's marrying, please God, somebody should marry off a child first, soon. When you make Sheva Brachos on Friday night, please have the Bill McCormick Orchestra and give them Jewish music to play. So the Ramah writes, the minhag in Europe, often they got married on Fridays. People didn't have a lot of money, so they got married on Fridays, the Shabbos meal. So they would but you want to have music at the wedding. Music enhances the joy of the wedding. That's why the 9 days our minhag is 3 weeks. We don't listen to music because music is beautiful. So you have to have music at the wedding. But it's Shabbos. The rest is a big deal. Ask the non-Jews to play. Have a non-Jewish band play at this is in the Shulchan Aruch. This is not like some left-wing modern Orthodox rabbi. This is like Rav Moshe Isserlis. So that's but today I think if you tried that you get your head shot off. I mean I can't imagine any Orthodox shul would allow you to do that. Okay, we don't follow the Shulchan Aruch all the time. I get it, but just people should be aware of what the issues are. So that if they come to Italy and see an organ in the shul, it's true they don't play it anymore because today we live in a global village. So by the 1960s already, you couldn't live in isolation. But in the 1700s, you could live in isolation. 1800s, I guess. Reform. The 1800s, the reform starts in Hungary and Germany. What does that have to do with you in Italy? Who cares what they're doing in Hungary? What does that have to do with me? I have my minhagim in Italy. We have a non-Jew play music on Shabbos. Great. Today, of course, the world, we can't allow that. All right, so those are some of the nice minhagim, I think, different minhagim we have in Italy, the Eila. Of course, the other one you'll notice. Somebody asked me from our group went to shul on Thursday morning. Hagva. It's not only that they do hagva before they lane, which v'zod hatarash, that's before lane. In other words, you show everybody what you're about to lane. You don't show after we laned. Here's what we did do. We do it in advance. Makes a lot of sense, no? So they do hagva. The Sfardim mentioned, but the way they do hagva, it's really cool. They put like a bar on the two poles of the Sefer Torah and two people. They do hagva with two people, and they sort of just do a 360 circle. Like they do it about 4 columns wide or so. They have this bar that fits across the Sefer Torah, and the two people, each one holds one, and they walk around. It's whatever. That's just different minakim to see. Okay, let's get back. So I figured it's on the Siddur. It's not really off topic, with this class on the Siddur. So I'm allowed to throw in minhagim of the Siddur that they do in Italy and wherever you go. Okay. By the way, are there any Italian shuls in New York? Does anybody know? There is an Italian shul in Yerushalayim because but I'm not aware. Does anybody know if there's an Italian shul anywhere else in North America? I have no idea. Anybody? Morris, you know? Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, I never heard that.
On the Lower East Side, there's the Romani shul.
Right, that's is Greece. That's when we go to Greece, we can talk about the Romania. Right, Romania and Italy are not Ashkenaz and Sephardi. That is correct because both of those communities were here long before Ashkenaz and Sephardi. The Romania is basically totally lost today. Because I wrote about that also. The Sephardim, on my first post on Provence, I wrote about that. The Spanish were so powerful that wherever they went, they took over. I mentioned in the Middle Ages, they were, according to many scholars, 90% of the Jews in the world lived in Spain. 90% lived in Spain at certain points. So when the Spanish people started leaving Spain, and they really started leaving big numbers in 1391, the expulsion was 1492, but there were a lot of anti-Semitic things already beginning in 1391. And so the Spanish would walk into a community and they would start doing their minhagim. They would just do their thing. And often there were big fights and often there. So here in Italy, the big shul in Rome has two minyanim. The Italian minhag upstairs, the Sephardic minhag downstairs. As in Rome, apparently there are a lot of Libyan Jews who live in Rome. They came from Libya, they're in Rome, they daven Sephardic. So it's very interesting how they do it. It's very nice and peaceful. And during they have the 7 o'clock minyan in the morning, the Sephardic minyan downstairs, 7:45, the Italian minyan upstairs, minhag Italy. But in many of these places, the Sephardim came over and they just by sheer numbers, they overpowered local communities. That's what I mentioned. The Meiri wrote a whole book, Magen Avot. He was very upset to defend the minhagim of Provence. That's why I wrote about it. The Sephardim came to Provence, the four papal states where there was no expulsion of Jews. Jews were never expelled from there. So they came and they started doing these minhagim. And the Meir said, get out of here. We have our own minhagim. You don't start with your minhagim. It's not like you could start your own shul. In the Middle Age, so in the Middle Ages, you weren't allowed to start your own shul. I don't like the shul, like start my own shul. Are you kidding? You'd be put in cherem. That's why the Hasidim were put in cherem. There were a lot of reasons the Hasidim were put in cherem, but one of the main ones was they started a shtibel. You're not allowed to daven in a shtibel. It's against the halacha. I'm sorry, I'm getting into trouble today. The halacha is the shul has to be the tallest building in the city. That's what you have in Florence. You can see from the whole thing. Okay, the church never allowed it to be the tallest. That's you can't do daven in a basement somewhere. I'd have your mind. Yeah, how can you do that? And you don't have to start your own shul. You're taking away the partner. There are all kinds of rules. The community ran shuls. When Rav Yaakov Emden accused Rav Yonatan Eifshitz of being a heretic, and he obviously didn't want to daven in his shul, they lived 2 blocks away from each other in Altona, near the German Denmark-Danish border. Or Hamburg. So Rav Yaakov Emden couldn't go to the shul anymore. So the community gave him permission to have a minyan in his house, 10 people. 10 people, 10 men, obviously the 10 men were allowed to come to his house. That was it. You start a shul. Can't start a shul. When the rabbis weren't rabbis of shuls, they were rabbis of communities and the community had to approve opening up a shul. So this is America, Isha Yashar Bein Av Yaseh. You tell this to an American, he's going to laugh in your face. But I've mentioned Rav Moshe Feinstein. It's in there. I've mentioned this before. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a series of tshuvot. You're not allowed to start a new shul. He's very concerned on Parnassa. It's not fair. He's not wrong. You have the big Young Israel, they have 400 members, and then a bunch of people that 3 hours, the chazan, the choir, the brother, I'm not interested. I want a yeshiva sheminyan, chick-chock, 2 hours, no singing, no congregational thing, no youth. Just let's get in and out, daven. And daf yom shir and go home, eat shulent. So they start. So 50 people leave the shul. No, that's $50,000, $100,000. What happened? How's the shul going to function? So Rav Moshe says you cannot do that. You're not allowed to start a regular shul. So nobody listens to this. They listen to Rav Moshe when they like what Rav Moshe says. So when they don't like, they don't listen. But I don't know. It's an issue. Okay. Anyways, that's another interesting issue. Starting shul. So in Europe, they built big shuls. You couldn't open up a new shul. So when the Hasidim came along and opened up new shuls, they were put into cherem, and their shuls were like what we call a shtipel, whatever. That's just what can I tell you? I'm not telling anybody what to do. But I'm saying you should understand where these things are coming from, what the halachas is, and we know everybody. You can always justify why it's allowed, like Ramosha has a tshuva, can you break away from the shul if they have an Israeli flag in the shul? You know that tshuva for Ramosha Feinstein? Who heard that tshuva? Ramosha Feinstein is the flag of Israel, a bunch of genocide, I don't have to tell you, some of the biggest haters of Israel are Jews. I mean, my understanding is 40% of New York Jews voted for this guy who's going to become the mayor, Madami. It's unbelievable. 40% of Jews in New York voted for this guy. I don't know. I don't understand it. I mean, I'm on the liberal side of things. I mean, you know me already. I'm not on the right winger, but still, come on. But
no, that's not true.
I'm sorry.
It's not true.
Anyway, there was Asher Moshe. They have an Israeli flag. We don't want to daven in a shul with an Israeli flag. So Ramosha says it's actually a fascinating tshuva. It shows you something special, and I'll say I only agree with half the tshuva. Ramosha writes, of course, the Zionists were terrible, and they're kofrim and rishaim and want to uproot Torah, all the things the Haredi world says about the Zionists. So I don't agree with him. Many people don't agree with him on that. But the greatness of Ramosha is nonetheless, that's not a reason to make a breakaway shul. So it's not. They're part of Klal Yisrael. We work together, and it's an unbelievable thing. And Ramosha begins his tshuva. Yeah, he's not totally wrong. We know this. The Zionists did take the Moroccan community and turn half of them into not. It's not. I'm not a rah religious Zionist that everything the Israeli government did was great in 1948. They did a lot of things that weren't so good, and on the whole, to most of us, we're religious Zionists. It's wonderful. It's the greatest miracle of the 20th century, the state of Israel. But it's not. There are a lot of problems, and the criticisms are not totally wrong. And they did make a lot of people not from. They made thousands of other people didn't assimilate. They have millions of Jews who would have assimilated not from. So there works both ways. But it's not like he's insane. So Ramosha writes, yes, they wanted to uproot Torah or whatever. There were Shaim. But nonetheless, that's not a reason to start the new shows. I find that such an amazing tshuva that that's the greatness of Ramosha Feinstein. And he has it in many other areas. They asked him about the Erev, right? Somebody asked him, can I give money to the Erev in Manhattan? Ramosha, right, the Erev in Manhattan in the 50s, the 60s is not good. Like he said, the Erev in Flatbush is not good. But Ramosha said, he writes in tshuva, I'm not the only rabbi. Other rabbis say the Erev is good because of the height. What happened if somebody was a member of the shul and the shul supported the Arab and the shul was having a campaign to raise money for the Arab? This person didn't carry Rav Moshe Netzor, so he felt bad. He's part of the shul. He should give money to the shul campaign for the Arab. But how can he support somebody? It's Mechal Shabbos, you're carrying this Arab. So Rav Moshe writes, I agree, the Arab is not good. But I'm not the only rabbi here, and the other rabbis disagree with me. And if your shul rabbi says the Arab is good and shul, you should give money. That's amazing. We don't have rabbis there. That's what made Rav Moshe Feinstein one among the many things that made him one of the greatest poskim of the 20th century. That's it. Okay, let's get back to learning our Siddur part a little bit. But one more thing I have to pick up on from last week, and then we were talking on revenge, right? If you remember, I hope you take notes. I have to take notes, but okay, whatever. Otherwise, I wouldn't remember anything. But we discussed going to court, right? Was it not taking revenge? And we had a whole discussion. I said, of course it's not revenge. It's justice. Obviously you can sue somebody, and somebody asked, or I don't remember, what if you're a multi-millionaire, you're only going to court because you hate this guy. If somebody else did it to you, you wouldn't go to court. So you're going to court because it's like you're mad at this guy. So would that be a violation of revenge? So that's a very interesting question. I'm away in Europe. I don't have, and I'm busy and everything. And so I was thinking about this. I thought perhaps, I don't know, but I thought that perhaps this is the same machloket that the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Salanter have. I think I mentioned this other times in the past. A famous, it's always a dangerous thing, a famous argument. A famous argument means I know about it, so that's famous. Okay, but they have this discussion. What happens if you spoke Lashon Hara about somebody, but he doesn't know, he or she doesn't know, and it's Erev Yom Kippur, and you said terrible things. The person doesn't know you did it. Do you have to go to the person and ask for forgiveness? What do you think? Let sleeping dogs lie, or whatever that expression is. Why do you want to open up a can of worms for? Or on the other hand, I besmirched him. I have to beg forgiveness. What do you do? So this is a machloket, obviously. That's between the Chafetz Chaim and Rav Yisrael Salanter. The Chafetz Chaim, who wrote the book, so to speak, on Lashon Hara, said, you have to tell him. You have to go over and tell him. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, God forbid. I think it's because of this story. There's the famous that the Chafetz Chaim asked Rabbi Yisrael Salanter to give a haskama to his book, and the Rabbi Yisrael Salanter refused because of this halacha. He says, I can't give a haskama to your book. So the Chafetz Chaim said, why don't you just write in your introduction? When Rav Moshe Feinstein gives an introduction, says, I didn't read the book, and I don't give haskamas on halacha works. But I know he's a nice guy, but I don't have, because I don't know that I agree with what he writes, but I'm sure he's doing a nice thing. So, it's a liberal thing. But Rav Yisrael Salanter said, I can't give haskam. People are going to see my name by your book, and they're going to think I approve of your book, and I don't approve of this halacha. So the Chafetz Chaim said, so right, you don't approve of halacha. He said, but nobody reads haskamas. No one's going to read it. They're just going to see my name. You know how you can market a book. When they put on the back of the cover, they don't quote everything they said on the book in the movie review. They quote only the positive things. So he refused to give over this halacha, I believe. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said you shouldn't. What are they arguing about? Well, what's the argument? Like yes, no. So I think the argument is why are we? What's the prohibition of lashon hara? So the Chafetz Chaim learns the prohibition of lashon hara is I'm doing a terrible thing. It's I'm destroying my character. How can I speak lashon hara? I'm doing it's a terrible character. So if I spoke lashon hara, the only way I can do tshuva is I have to let the person know. Until I repent, I have to admit what I did was wrong. Because the prohibition, lashon hara is I spoke lashon hara. That's the prohibition. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter understands lashon hara is the damage it causes to our community, that it creates machloket. You said something negative about the person, but he doesn't know about it, and I speak to him. It's going to make it worse. So that's way worse. I shouldn't talk about it. You won't get tshuva because I didn't. So what? Too bad. You won't get tshuva because he won't forgive you, whatever. He doesn't know about it. So that's the argument. It's the same argument that I realized this only recently. The Chafetz Chaim, says when you're, Rav Shechter used to tell us that the Sefer Chafetz Chaim was written in order to tell you when you're supposed to speak Lashon Hara, right? Everybody says the Chafetz Chaim, the book, is written about the laws not to speak negative. He said, no, it's the exact opposite. The Chafetz Chaim is written when you're obligated to say negative speech. It gives you all the rules. Normally, I can't say something wrong, but if it's you're going to go into a business deal with somebody and you're going to harm you, so you have to speak. So the Chafetz Chaim lays out a bunch of categories. When what you need to fulfill, you have to know it's true yourself. You can't rely on rumors. That's a good policy. You can't exaggerate, all these things. And one of the things he writes is you have to be properly motivated. That when you're going into business with somebody, and I know he's a crook, so I have to tell you, but I'm only telling you because I don't like that guy. I'm not properly motivated. I want to get something. I'm not doing it because I really care about you, but I want to look good. So the Chafetz Chaim says I'm not allowed to say lashon hara. So that's halacha to me. I've never understood this halacha. I said, it makes no sense. The guy's going to go, and just because I don't like him, just because my motive is wrong, he should go into business with this guy. So, of course, now I understand it. That, by the way, the Rabbi Shoshan, they disagree with the Chafetz Chaim. And we generally, I think the Jomzak is not like the Chafetz Chaim here. We don't follow the Chafetz Chaim. And it's the same argument. The Chafetz Chaim, lashon hara is all about what I'm doing wrong. And so I'm only allowed to do something wrong if I'm properly motivated. It's like an avera lishma. We have this principle in Jewish law. If I'm sinning, if I'm allowed to sin, ya'eh, whatever, the words we're not going to get into it now, you're sometimes what we call an avera lishma. Something that's wrong, but you're doing it for proper motives is sometimes greater than the Gemara says in a mitzvah shelo lishma. But it has to be lishma. It has to be lishma. So the Chafetz Chaim is learning that when I tell you lashon hara to prevent harm from you, I'm talking lashon hara. Just that lashon hara is allowed. It's an avera lishma, but it has to be lishma. If I'm not properly motivated, I can't do it. And the other part say, what are you talking about? The reason I talk lashon hara is I want to prevent harm from happening. Who cares what my motivation is? As long as I'm doing what's to prevent, if I can prevent harm, I have to prevent harm. Who cares what my motivation is? I have to prevent you from going into a business. It's really a fundamental dispute on how you view the prohibition of lashon hara. It's a very important dispute. I don't think people are really fully aware of this. But this is why the Chavetz Chaim can say that if you're not properly motivated, even though normally I would be allowed, I'm obligated to speak Lashon Hara, no, because an Avera Lishma is Lishma. In other words, it's not an Avera Lishma. It's not an Avera. It's a mitzvah to talk in that situation. So I thought maybe, this is it's a nice thing to know. I thought maybe it's the same thing. If I'm taking revenge, if I'm going to court because I hate this guy, not because I really want justice, it's a way to get revenge. Is that a prohibition? So it could depend, maybe, I don't know, on the same argument. The Chavetz Chaim say, well, that's the terrible thing, what you're doing, and that's a violation of revenge in the Torah, even though I'm getting justice. Who cares? When you're in a court of law, it's justice, and justice is always allowed. Who cares what my motivation is for justice? I don't want to pursue justice with the other guy. That's up to me. I can pursue justice with whoever wants. Okay. All right, now let's get back in the 15 minutes we have left. We were talking about Leiv Tov, right? Anybody remember from last week, Rabbi Yisrael ben Arach, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach? I don't know, we'll get too much in Elokai Netzor this week, but okay. So we discussed last week about I wanted Elokai Netzor l'shanai petach libi b'toratecha. That's where we're up to. Open up my heart. So we began the discussion. Petach libi, open my heart. So the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students, and he asked his 5 students to each one to choose the proper path. And let me just quickly share the Mishnah. It's, I think, a relatively well-known Mishnah, but I myself probably don't remember it by heart. So it's Pirkei Avot. Here it's no, that's the second. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says Ein Tova means a good Ein, not to be jealous. That's really means Ein Tova. Rabbi Yeshua says a good friend, like a good neighbor. All state is here. No, that's the next one. Rabbi Yosemir, a Shachein Tov. It's interesting. A good neighbor, a good friend. Rabbi Shimon says one who has a little foresight. He thinks about the impact of his action. And Rabbi Eliezer says Leiv Tov. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Says Leiv Tov, a good heart. And he says, I see, Roni, this is the greatest one. And we discussed last week in terms of who's a greater student. That Rav Eliezer ben Horkenis was like, he had a photographic memory. He never forgot anything, like a cistern, right? That as we said this, right? He used to list their virtues, is a plaster cistern which loses not a drop. And Rav Eliezer was a Mayan Hamit Gaber. He was like an overflowing water. What's more important, knowledge or analysis, application? We said that's a maklok in the Gemara, Sinai Elokai Harim. The Gemara says, Sinai, knowledge is more important than this guy who has this beautiful insight. Got to know the stuff backwards and forwards before you get to the analysis. And we pointed out, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, many others point out, makes a lot of sense. In today's generation, that's not true. We have computers, you don't have to know anything anymore. Rabbi Google knows everything for you. You use artificial intelligence. And I say that not joking. Obviously, you have to know something. But the rabbi really doesn't have to know so much anymore. He has to know how to use information. I don't want to say who it's about, but someone I know years ago learned in a yeshiva. So it's one of the famous Rosh yeshivas. So I asked him, I never met this Rosh yeshiva. So obviously, he isn't living anymore. So I said, what was it like? So he paused, and he said he was a brilliant Amma Aretz. That's how he described him. He said, in other words, he says, compared to other Rosh Yeshiva, he didn't really know so much. I'm sure he knew a lot, but he didn't know. He wasn't like someone who could rattle off Tosfot, but he was brilliant. He would take a look at a Tosfot and can immediately analyze and figure out. So that's what we describe him. He's like a brilliant Amaretz. So that's what we have today. The learning can be done by AI, can do all your learning for you. ChatGPT can do all your learning. What you have to do is figure out, I'm exaggerating, but it's true to a large extent. You have to know how to access information, and then you have to know how to analyze it. But the rabbi doesn't have to know every tshuva that was ever written, which is impossible to know anyway. That's a shaila whether it's important to know. Rev Menashe Klein would, I'm sure, because I know what he argued other things, would argue this is terrible. We shouldn't do this because, in other words, it's the same way many poskim say it's asur to check vegetables with a microscope. Not that you don't have to; it's forbidden. It's forbidden to do such a thing. Because if the Torah says, if you don't see it by the naked eye, it looks kosher, it's kosher. We don't have to judge things. God doesn't expect us to take out a magnifying glass and a new invention, what they're called, a microscope that can do to 5,000 times one. You can't eat any food. Every food has bugs and bacteria. You can't eat anything. So the halacha doesn't demand that. If the naked eye doesn't recognize it, it doesn't count in halacha. So it's wrong. Not only you don't have to, it's wrong. I know I said it because Rav Menashe Klein, it was he's not living in the Mishnah Halacha. He was a big posek in Borough Park, not from our world, not from my world, but he was the Ungever Rav, right? The big Talmud Chacham in Borough Park. So Morris, you knew his son in Toronto. He had a doctor's son. He had two marriages. His first wife, he had like a modern Orthodox son, and became a medical doctor. Very very bright. Rabbi used to learn with him. Now I'm forgetting the son's name. Rabbi Menashe Klein had a son who was a doctor in Toronto. When I was in Orchaim, Rabbi Bori, our Rosh Yeshiva, used to learn with him Bechavrusa. He was a medical school at U of T. I don't remember his name. He was
I
the
don't
son
know. It's a lot of Kleins. I don't
from
know.
the first wife. Anyways, Rabbi Menashe Klein says it's forbidden to check a Sefer. Now today you have a Sefer Torah. They put it through a computer check because it's 305,000 letters. I don't think a Sefer Torah ever in history has been written without a mistake. I mean, how can a human write 305,000 whatever letters and not make a mistake? So they always find a mistake in the Sefer Torah. Rabbi Menashe Klein says it's forbidden to do such a thing, to use a computer to check a Sefer Torah. If the blind eye doesn't pick it up, the Sefer Torah is kosher. I know. I think most people don't agree with him. We have the tools. Why not make our Sefer Torah? I don't know. It's a very interesting question, really. So maybe it's not good. I have to worry that in the 14th century, some rabbi I never heard of wrote like a tshuva about. So I don't know. It's a very interesting guy. I'll just tell the cute jerk. Remember Shner Lyman? I'm sure many of you know him. You know, the Queens, a great historian, great Talmud Chacham. And so he grew up in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. I think McKeesport, some small town in Pennsylvania. So whenever he used to go back and visit, they'd always give him an aliyah. Whenever he had an aliyah, he would always notice a psul in the Sefer Torah. So they stopped giving him an aliyah. Every time he comes to shul, I don't want him to have an aliyah. I don't want him to find the mistakes in the Sefer Torah. Okay. Anyway, so that's why am I saying all this? Anyways, that's how did I get into this now? I forget. I'm sorry?
Sinai Oker Harim.
Right. Sinai Oker Harim, right. They tell you how much you have to know, and they do all the knowledge for us. Fine. Okay, so that's today, and Oker Harim is more important than a saying. But I just wanted to point out something fascinating. I'm sure many of you may know the story, but just to point out the tragic story of Rav Elazar ben Aruch. We never hear from him again. He's like almost like Elisha ben Avuya. Everybody knows about Elisha ben Avuya, Acher, and but they know the famous stories. He's quoted in Pirkei Avot once. Elisha ben Avuya is quoted. Al Tistakain b'kan el Mashiach, but I think he's the Mishnah before that. By the way, I heard something fascinating when we were in France last week. Somebody told me a theory I never heard it before. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if other people say it. Fascinating. Acherim Omrim. Sometimes the Mishnah says Acherim Omrim. Other opinions. Now the Mishnah. The Gemara says that Acherim is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, whenever the Mishnah says Acherim, it's really Rabbi Meir. Now, the Mishnah often quotes Rabbi Meir. So why does it sometimes say Rabbi Meir, Omer, and someone says Acherim? Person said it's brilliant. I don't know if it's true. It says Acherim are the things he learned from his Rebbe, Acher. Rabbi Meir's Rebbe was Acher, and then Acher went on a different path. But they, as you know, I'm sure maybe you know, they remain very close. He still remained very, very close to his teacher, who was an Apikoros, the famous Apikoros, and he rejected everything. What's Milton Steinberg's book, As a Driven Leaf, but Elisha ben Avuya. And so whenever he wanted to quote his Rebbe, so it's Acherim Omdim. I thought that was fascinating. I don't know if it's true, and I heard this in France. I really have to ask somebody, but I thought that was a very interesting thing. So Rav Elazar ben Aruch is almost as tragic a story. So I just want to show you very quickly, and then I see we're going to have to end really. But it's really it's a tragedy because remember the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was the greatest. He was the Mayan Hamit Gaber. He was the overflowing well, and if all the other sages were on one level, and he would outweigh them all. The Gemara has in Shabbos, where are we going here? Gemara, this is Shabbos. Gemara says like this. I should say this here. I'm going on a 5-star trip in Italy, so I have to be careful that I say this. But we're on a Jewish history trip, learning but Chamra de Piriguta Umaya de Musi Kipech Aser Shvat Misrael. The Gemara says like this: the wine, fancy wine, and fancy bathhouses deprived the 10 lost tribes. So the way Safari explained, because these tribes were attracted to the pleasure, you get too much into materialism and pleasure, it's not good for Torah. So the Gemara says, Rav Elazar ben Aruch, he went there. He went to this place, I don't know, Chamra de Puriguta, wherever Puriguta is. Who knows if it's a real place? Who knows if it's a literal story? He went there. Emshech Batre went on vacation for a week, and he stayed there for 10 years. He loved it, the good life. 7-star hotels, beaches, everything you could ask for. What could be greater? Imshech Batre, he got caught up in it. He forgot learning. There was no Daf Yomi Shir. There's no nothing. He forgot his learning. It's pretty amazing. Ki Hadar Ata. After 10 years, he came back to whatever. So they came to shul. They gave him an aliyah. Kam lemikra b'sifra. He came to read from the Torah. Ba lemikra. So it was Parshat Bo, or it was right before Pesach. He was coming home for the Pesach Seder. The long lost cousin was coming for the Pesach Seder. It's Parshat HaChodesh, and they're reading HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. And Amar, he said, HaCherish Haya Libam. He didn't know how to read Hebrew anymore. So now you notice HaCheresh, Chodesh and Cheresh, like it's an easy mistake. The Resh and the Dalet look almost alike. And Libam, Lachem, also looks very much alike. The Beit and the Kaf, it's very similar. So this, and HaCheresh, Haya Libam is very similar to HaChodesh Lachem. Of course, it means the total opposite. I mean, HaCheresh Libam, my heart was deaf. I mean, this is such a sharp comment of the rabbis. Like the charifut of this comment is amazing. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, what's that? That's the founding of the Jewish people, the first mitzvah given to Jewish people. Yitzim Mitzrayim. It's how we became a nation. They're basically, and what happened, Nebuch, and he reads, I'm deaf. I'm cut off from Jewish history. My heart is of stone. HaCheresh, my heart is deaf. HaCheresh Haya Libam. This is the person who said that Leiv Tov is the most important thing we have. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, you're right, because Bichlal Torah Divrechem, right? Remember, that was his answer. Ayin Tov, Chaver Tov, Shachain Tov. They're all included in Leiv Tov. So the Gemara says, whatever this means, the rabbis, they were sitting in shul, everybody was embarrassed. What an embarrassment. This was the greatest rabbi who ever was. He can't read Aleph Bet anymore, almost. They had mercy. So we have that by Rabbi Yochanan. The rabbis had pity. They prayed he should die. But that was a different prayer. They had pity he should die after Reish Lakish. But Hadar Talmud, and he remembered his Talmudic learning. But we never hear from him again. We never hear from him again, and he's like the lost figure in Jewish history, the one who was the greatest student, perhaps, of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the one who saved Judaism. I just wrote about it. If you read about it, what I sent out this morning, that had the rabbis listened to, had the other Jews in Israel listen to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, maybe the Second Temple would not have been destroyed. I mean, Mark pointed that out on our trip yesterday. Everybody blames the Romans. It's not to blame the Romans, but he said, it's not so simple. The rabbis also put a lot of blame on the Jewish people. We know they caused sinat chinam, but the zealots who burned all the food, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, you don't pick on the Romans. What, are you out of your mind? You think you can pick on the Romans? It's an important Musar Haskel. I don't have to explain any further. Yirmiyahu told it to Yoshiyahu. We're going to read that on Tishbav. You don't start up with world powers. Israel's a small little country. We don't get so arrogant to think that we can take on the world and do whatever we want. That's the message of all our Nevi'im, and that was the message of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. When we don't listen, very terrible things happen to the Jewish people. So this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's top student. And Leiv Tov, have a good heart. We're living in difficult time to carry. And look what happened to him, after whatever thing happened. So it's just a very tragic story. So all this whole thing, because we say in the every day, 3 times a day, Petach Livi B'Torah, we ask God to open our heart. Our heart should not be Hacheresh Haya Libam. It should not be deaf. What it means when people are suffering. It's not, obviously, it's a play on words, but it's such a deep comment the rabbis are saying. What does it mean our heart is deaf? Our cheresh haya libam means people are suffering and we don't hear them, and people need our need and we don't hear the needs. And, we have to hear all the people who live below the poverty line, all the poor people, and, and this welfare is important and helping people. And that's what it means to have a good heart. That's what Yochanan says is the most important thing. When you're too wealthy, that's where he got too caught up in the wine and the fancy wine. So sometimes people are very wealthy. Obviously, those are the ones who have to help. They're the ones who are capable of helping. But we all know that the danger of too much wealth is that sometimes you don't understand how the middle class lives and how the poor people live. I have that problem. I live upper middle class lifestyle, and whatever you want to call it. There'll be people with defend Sue. Some people will say I'm impoverished. I live among some people who, in our shul, there are 3 billionaires at least. Morris, he's looking up it. He knows there are at least 3 billionaires out of 100 men. Maybe who come to shul. When I say billionaires, I mean billionaires. I don't mean like $50 million. I mean like whatever digits there are in billions. And they give great ballet stuff. I'm not that, but I'm saying it's very easy to lose sight of what that person. So everything's relative. But I live in upper middle class, so it's very hard. I have to realize there are people mamish who it's hard for them for Yontif. They don't have enough food. They can't enjoy Shabbos, and so Baruch Hashem, our community is quite good at this, but it's not 100% But anyways, that's what the Gemara is saying. That the Leiv Tov of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, Petach libi b'Torah techa. So that's it. We'll please God, we'll pick up next week on the development more, and hopefully I'll please God from back in Toronto. But anyways, Petach libi b'Torah. I think just an important story. I don't know how many people were familiar with that story with Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. The people had heard that a little bit. Okay, so did I explain anything? You have a better explanation? My explanation was fine, Debbie. I pass? Okay. So just let me take a quick look at the question okay, just let me do a quick review, and then I'll take a look at any comments. Okay, we discussed some of the minhagim they do here in Italy, the beautiful minhag of not of laning the whole Cheda Egel on Shiva Sarvatos made so much sense. Le'ela u'le'ela, they say the beam in the front, different things develop because of different histories of the community. So we talked on revenge, the whole debate about what's the essence of Lashon Hara. Is it the prohibition on the person speaking? So we don't care so much the impact. So you got to have a proper motive. You're going to speak Lashon Hara. You have to ask forgiveness if you've done something wrong. You can't just go to court and sue somebody. You have to have a proper motive for real justice. Or no, they say Lashon Hara is to prevent a breakdown in society. So who cares what my motive is? If somebody's going into business with a crook, who cares? Well, it's like we do mitzvah, shalom lishma. Aveiras have to be lishma. So that's the question. When you talk Lashon Hara, when you're allowed to, is that an aveira that has to be lishma, or is that a mitzvah that can be done even shalom lishma? So it's a very fundamental argument, but I don't think we think of it in that term so much. But I think that's the way it works. And then we just got a little bit to finish up this idea of having a leiv tov, petach libi b'torah techa. So it isn't a joke. Remember, an Elokai Netzor in many ways expresses our prayers more than anything else. In other words, the Shmon Esrei was ordained by the rabbis, where we discussed Elokai Netzor, the Gemara list of 11 prayers, and after we daven, this is what we daven. So what does that mean? I have to daven. The rabbis tell me to pray for this, pray for that. I don't really care so much. I don't care so much if we don't have that samach David Avdecha. Like it's not bothering me so much. But the davening after davening, that's what speaks to me. That's why each one was so individual. That's from my heart. But that's what I really want. So we have to be not to talk Lashon Hara, but to be b'Torah techa. Like you have to know what Lashon Hara is. What's the prohibition? How properly motivated? It's a fascinating debate, and I do think my understanding is the poskim do not follow the Chafetz Chaim. That generally, I don't know if there's but there. I think most of it. Yes, your rabbi. I spoke Lashon Hara. A person doesn't know about it. I think most people would say, don't bring it up. Let sleeping dog. Don't. When you want to open up a can of worms, it can make it much worse. And we view Lashon Hara in that sense, not in the Chafetz Chaim sense, I think. And but anyways, petach libi b'torah techa. Okay, just let me. What's 1859? Hold on. Okay, we are starting 9:30. Okay, that was me. Okay, 409. Oh, so maybe 359 in Boston. Okay, 409 you're listening here. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we Sephardi read more vocal traditions. Yes, longer davening depends on local synagogue. Absolutely. It's 1861. I think. I assume you're talking about the unification of Italy, which is 1861. Not, but 1859 is close. Do you know if they read? No, I said that's only on Shiva Aseret Tammuz. Person doesn't know how. They're still damaged because those who heard it will think badly about the person. Oh, so you're raising another issue. So I agree. You're raising a very important issue. That's right. I didn't think of really that if everybody else knows about, but if everybody else knows about it, he's going to find out about it too. In other words, the idea that other people know about it, so it's important for me to correct, not so much with him, because he doesn't know about it. Why do I want to fight? But everybody else. And so I would agree that in such a situation, maybe even I don't know for sure, maybe even Rabbi Salanter would agree that you have to speak out, even if he might find out. But I find in reality, I don't think that's going to happen so often because although yes, some people know, so you can tell them privately. I don't know, but you're right. These are complicated questions. The solution is not to speak lashon hara. But as we already learned, that's not a realistic solution. I mentioned every week, because it's so true. Our rabbis were so realistic. They were so human, which is why they make them so great. And the rabbis understood we are going to talk lashon hakol, even if not pure lashon hara, at least avak lashon hara. So you're right. These are serious questions, and I think, listen, depending on how it's done, what's done, you have to use basically seichel. You have to figure out I don't think on anything you can give a psak. I'm not interested in giving a psak halacha. Nobody should give a psak. Every case is different. You have to use sensitivity and speak to a psychologist as much as you speak to a rabbi on these issues, because it's not just halachic issues. Okay, there's a town in Italy called Perugia. Yeah, we're not going there, which is ancient and horrid. And you're saying that's the same thing? I have no idea. Listen, you go to some of these places. Europe is beautiful. It really is beautiful. I never been to the small town, the big cities. They're just made for people. They don't have cars the way. I mean, they do have, but but you have these big, wide open walking areas. Cafe. Everybody eats on the street. Cafes, and it's just a different. You don't have these skyscrapers here. I mean, whatever. I think more. I maybe London and Paris, which I haven't been to Paris ever, and London 35 years ago. I maybe did different than Frankfurt. I don't know, but I'm saying there's a certain more.
Human scale.
I'm sorry, pedestrian
Human scale.
human scale here. That's something special that you don't have in big car-driven North America. Whatever it is. Anyways, okay. All right. Thank you. I think we can stop here. Please, God, next week we'll be back to
Jay,
Yes, Zev.
you got a moment about Venice?
Of course I have a moment. Yeah. Shabbos,
mentioned
we're
Venice.
coming at 7:30 in Florence.
Are you
And of
gonna
course,
be?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to be in Venice, or you were there?
No, we'll be in Venice Monday and Tuesday, and then please God, I'm coming
Oh,
home on Wednesday.
Let me
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
you a cute story about Venice. When my daughter got married, she went to Italy with her husband on the honeymoon, and they were in Venice on Friday. So they went to this restaurant and arranged to eat there for Shabbos, a kosher
Right.
restaurant. So at the
Gum-gums, I assume.
At the meal, the owner sat there with them, started telling them that he grew up in Montreal and went to school at Chabad. So my daughter right away remembered I went to Chabad in Montreal. So she says to him, "Do you know a guy named Zev Kaufman?" So he says, "No, but I knew a Wolf Kaufman." So I said, "Yeah, that's my dad." It turns out he was my classmate in grade 10, Itcha Minkovich.
Uh-huh.
He might
Okay,
still be the
just
owner
slower.
there.
You know what? I'm telling you, who's been to the ghetto in Rome? I'm going to write about it. That's going to be my next piece. I am inspired walking on the ghetto in Rome. First, not just because there are 15 kosher restaurants, and I'm not exaggerating. There are 15 kosher eateries on one block, and there are no cars allowed. The people, the joy, when people travel, they're in a different mood. So we daven mincha outside, like by one of the restaurants. Okay, we'll meet at the restaurant 8:10, 8 o'clock. We'll daven at the corner, break by the shul. Shul was over. We're going to make a mincha minyan. To make a mincha minyan, so 15 people come from the other restaurant. Mincha, like lahavdil, like at the kotel almost lahavdil. People come. So the minyan Hasidim. I said there are people in black hats, but only black baseball hats. There was nobody. There were Hasidim, like you could tell, like with payas, but there was nobody wearing a black hat. They were in Europe, like on vacation. Nobody. There were people in white shirts, but nobody with, But it was really people in shorts. And everybody talks to everybody. Where are you from? There's just a friendly atmosphere. Okay, everybody's on vacation. And where I point out, unfortunately, and things they do, like they would never daven. This is a tragic statement. They would never daven together in New York or in Toronto. But when you're in Italy, everybody's like friendly to everybody. It's so beautiful. And the life. And to compare and think what the ghetto was, the ghetto walls came down in 1870. To think what this was like 150 years ago and what it is today. Wow, it's like like we say on Pesach, or whatever, all those things we say. It's such a, we were at the Arch of Titus. So you know how many people say, this one can be Arch Titus. They go there. Titus, where are you? We Jewish people have survived 2,000 years. Okay, very nice. We want to show, we're still here. That's the beauty of, the Romans are still here too. They haven't gone anywhere either. And okay, but fine. I get it. I get it. So there's something beautiful to walk where the ghetto was and see the life and this beautiful shul that was built after the ghetto walls came down, and people just having a wonderful time and living as Jews, totally open, totally free, totally safe. I mean, there, unlike in New York, there are guards by every shul, so you think that's bad. The police protect every Jewish shul all day. They stand there just with their machine guns. So I don't know. Whatever. They take security seriously here. But it's really such a beautiful feeling, and I don't think anything else. I'm just something. My interest in these trips, to see the Jewish history, it's really beautiful to see what it was. But the ghetto in Rome was a horrific place. It was really one of the worst ghettos. There were better. The ghetto in Florence was better living conditions than the ghetto in Rome. And now the ghetto, and they call it we're eating at Baguetto tonight. That's the restaurant we're eating at. Baguetto. They have one in Rome, Florence, Milan, and Venice. They have Baguetto. It's like a chain of restaurants. We eat at Roost before you even know the restaurants. Those who traveled here. I know it's really it's very beautiful to see the Jewish people. That's my feeling. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but anyways, okay. Please God,
See, Chabad is big.
there's Chabad here. Chabad here is a little bit
Very.
too much, Zev. Yeah, we won't go. Chabad here is more. There was a rabbi in the Chabad. I saw him this was in France. His kippah said Yechi Adonenu Moreinu HaMashiach. The Chabad in Venice is known to be a total messianic. Like it's pure messianism. I didn't get that feeling in Rome because there is a Chabad on the ghetto. Like there's the big shul and then there's a little Chabad. Small, only opened up a year ago. Opposite the kosher ice cream store and the kosher pizza store next door to the falafel place. It's like and there are four guys. I'll end with this. I mean, nobody has to stay. So I met one guy on Shiva Sarvat Tammuz. So we got here on Sunday. That's when I got here. And so he's here from Boston for a month. Four guys. They come to New York on shlichus, like single guys. He's like 23 years old. What are you doing here? He learns a little bit. They put on tefillin on people all day. They come here. They sit in all the tourists walking by, many of whom, of course, are not observant. So they put on tefillin on people. That's what's Chabad going to do. So I said to him, how many people put on tefillin every day? So he says, about 60. I said, okay, that's nice. So they're putting on tefillin on 60 people, four guys in the court day, and they learn a little bit. They have a Chabad house. They give you some watermelon, some cake. So what a world. I don't know what to say. What a world we live in. But and I say, the ghetto self reminds me, despite everything that's gone on October 7th and all the terrible anti-Semitism, this is the best time to be a Jew in the last 2,000 years. If you had to choose one time in Jewish history when you want to live, it's now. It's despite all the problems. Okay. Anybody, enough of my rambling and editorial
Shabbat
comments?
shalom.
Agree or don't agree, but
Yes.
please God, have a learning next week, and please God, we'll see you all next week. And Rabbi Lipta, of course, Sunday morning. Everybody be well. Shabbat shalom, and we should hear good things. Please God. Okay, thank you very much. Shabbat
Enjoy.
shalom. Enjoy. Thanks a lot. Okay. How are my in-laws doing, Morris?
Yeah, they look good. They look good.
Yeah, okay, yeah. My mother-in-law wrote me today. When are you coming home already? So I said, okay, please
Right.
God on Wednesday. But
I saw them at Shul at Shabbos. They look
yeah.
good.
Okay, good. All right, thanks a lot. Have a good
All
Shabbat.
right.
Okay, bye-bye.